Hey everyone, it's Tracy Martirani here from Holistic Wellness with Tracy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about holiday meals, specifically trying to come up with a good option for a meatless Thanksgiving entree. My husband and I don't eat meat other than seafood, which makes Thanksgiving a little bit difficult because we need something other than turkey for us to eat. One of the benefits of turkey is usually the gravy that comes with it. So I always am looking for an entree that has some sort of gravy texture to it that's warm and moist with enough gravy that maybe it'll spill over into the vegetarian stuffing, which is just as delicious as meat-based stuffing. And what we finally come up with after a few years of trying different things is mushroom pot pie. Mushroom pot pie just screams fall. It screams harvest because it is full of potatoes and carrots and onions and obviously mushrooms in that nice crusty pie shell. It's yummy, delicious, and fairly easy to make. It's not quick, so I wouldn't make this for any regular weeknight meal, but it is perfect for making even for a Sunday family dinner or just to make smaller versions to stick in the freezer or as your holiday entree. Start by making pie crust. Now, you can use your favorite pie crust recipe. You really just want a double crust. Or you can also buy refrigerated, pre-made pie crust. I typically make my own because a lot of the pre-made crusts that you buy in the store contain lard, so they're not vegetarian, and they also contain preservatives and things that aren't really necessary. I also find that really, once you do it a few times and get the hang of it, making dough at home from scratch really isn't that complicated. You need flour, salt, butter, and water. And that's about it, and it tastes delicious. For years, I used to make my pie crust in a bowl, and I would use a pastry blender to cut the butter into the flour. And then I realized you can do it in the food processor much quicker and much easier than using the pastry dough or the pastry cutter. However, if you don't have a food processor, if you have to use a pastry blender or even two knives, like I used to use two butter knives, actually just sort of cutting them back and forth as well, anything works. Do whatever you choose, whatever makes it easiest for you. And you simply just allow the food processor to go until it breaks down the butter and you get like little pea-shaped pieces of butter within the flour. And then I turn it back on and I add ice cold water, 1 tablespoon at a time, until you get a nice soft dough. And then once it looks good, you just pull it out. I like to wrap it in plastic wrap and stick it in the fridge for a little while. That allows it to be nice and cold. And when it bakes, when it's nice and cold, you get a crispier crust. And plus, I still have to make all the filling, so it might as well rest in the refrigerator while I'm doing all of that. And now, with just a little bit of coffee, I'm ready to move on to making the filling. The filling is a multiple step process for this recipe. I'm sure there's easier ways to do it, but this is how I do it, and it seems to work out good. I have a few red potatoes. I'm just washing them. I'm going to peel them up and dice them into sort of bite-sized pieces and stick them in a pot of water on the stove to let those soften up while I move on to the other ingredients. And while the potatoes cook, I'm just going to get an onion started in a large saucepan. So I added a little olive oil. I'm just going to dice this onion. I think I'm only going to use half of it. And I'm dicing it into fairly small pieces. I'm just stirring them around to get them coated in the oil, and I'll let them cook away as I prep my other ingredients. Making this is a lot of just prepping, chopping, and getting stuff into a pan. Here I'm just prepping my veg. I'm not going to do anything with it right away, so I'm just chopping it up and sticking it in a bowl so it's ready when I want it. I have a couple stalks of celery, a couple small carrots. I started with 3 carrots and I realized the one really big one was probably going to be too much, so I set that aside. I'll use it for something else and just use these 2 smaller ones. But again, just like every other recipe that I love, if you like more carrots, use more carrots, use more or less celery, use more or less onion. Make it whatever sounds good to you. Now here I have some shiitake mushrooms. Normally I buy whole mushrooms and then I just cut the stems off and then slice them up and chop them up. But the grocery store only had pre-cut mushrooms, so that's what we're using. So I'm just popping the shiitake mushrooms in with the onion, letting them soften down for a while I continue to work on other things. In addition to the shiitake mushrooms, I'm also using some portobello caps. I have also used in the past lion's mane and oyster mushrooms. Really, it depends on whatever the grocery store has. The basic recipe here is really just shiitake and portobellos. And even if I didn't have the shiitake, you could do it all with just portobellos. I would just use more portobellos. My potatoes have been cooking away over here. I'm just checking to see how tender they are. They look pretty good, so I'm just going to strain them and set them aside. I'm not quite ready for them yet, but I didn't want them to overcook. The mushrooms or I should say the shiitake mushrooms and onions are looking pretty good. So I'm adding some water and then some soy sauce, which I know sounds a little bit odd, but it makes it delicious. And really it adds just enough salt that you don't need to add any other salt to this dish. And then I'm thickening it with rice flour. Now, this original recipe, when I found it, specifically said use rice flour. You can't use any other flour. I actually use the rice flour, and then if it's not thick enough, I come back later and add a little cornstarch if I need to. You might have noticed I spiced it up with just a couple teaspoons of poultry seasoning and some black pepper. If you don't have poultry seasoning, you could just use sage and thyme. And then in a large saute pan, I'm starting to soften my veg. So I'm adding in my carrots and celery, letting that cook a little bit until it begins to soften. And then I didn't get it on film, but I just added in my chopped portobello mushrooms and allowing that to cook until it's nice and browned. I use just a little bit of red wine to deglaze the pan. You can skip that step if you want, or just add a little bit of water. You don't want to add a lot of liquid, just enough to add a little bit of flavor if you're using wine, and to get some of the nice brown bits off the bottom of the pan. Now to my sort of gravy mixture, I'm adding all of this. So I'm adding the mushrooms and the carrots and the celery, and then with the potatoes. And I just let this cook down and simmer for a little bit and see how thick it is. Again, if you want to add a little bit of cornstarch, you can if it's not thickening up for you. And then I let it sit without heat, letting it cool down just a little bit while I roll out my dough. Today I'm actually making a smaller version. This filling is enough for a nice deep dish pot pie, but I had the smaller pan that I'm making just for my husband and I. And then I decided, instead of doing a regular top to it, I'm just going to do something a little bit more decorative. We'll see how it comes out. So I have my oven preheating. I just ladle the mixture in. I am going to have some left over again because I'm not making a full-size pie, and I will freeze my leftovers and have it as like a side dish. Maybe have it over some mashed potatoes or biscuits. I don't know yet. And then I have this cute little cookie cutter that cuts out little leaves. So again, I decided instead of the standard topping, I'm just cutting up a bunch of leaves and laying it all over the top. Thought it might be something a little different, a little festive. You can get creative. I have done a full top and just cut in like what looks like wheat on the top. That was beautiful. I've also used these little cookie cutters to make leaves or pumpkins and colored them with food coloring. That was really cute. And here it is, the finished product. It looks delicious, and spoiler alert, it is delicious. And it makes, like I said, a great Sunday dinner or a Thanksgiving entree. Thank you for joining me. Again, my name is Tracy Martirana, and I use my knowledge of nutrition, Ayurveda, yoga, herbs, and meditation to bring you information and inspiration to help you live a healthy, happy, and balanced life.